If you could step back into the 1920s for just a moment, you probably wouldn't feel like you were standing on the edge of disaster. You'd feel optimistic. The war was over. Industry was booming. New inventions were everywhere. Radios were bringing the world into people's living rooms. Cars were turning dusty roads into highways. Cities were growing upward instead of outward. Life felt faster, richer, more modern. People genuinely believed they were entering a new era, an era where progress had finally beaten instability. And that's the uncomfortable part, because that's exactly how bubbles always feel from the inside. The same bubble that crashed the 1920s is back, not in the details, but in the psychology that creates it. Back then, the stock market wasn't just for wealthy insiders anymore. Ordinary people were buying stocks for the first time. Banks made it easy. You didn't need much money. You could buy on margin, borrow most of what you needed, put down a small amount yourself, and ride the upside. If prices went up, you felt smart. If they went up again, you felt justified. And if someone warned you things were getting overheated, it was easy to ignore them, because nothing felt broken. The economy was growing, companies were expanding, technology was changing everything. Why shouldn't markets reflect that? It didn't feel reckless. It felt logical. That's what makes bubbles dangerous. They don't start with bad ideas. They start with good ones, pushed just a little too far. Fast forward 100 years, different world, same rhythm. The 2020s did not begin with optimism. They began with shock. A global pandemic shut down economies almost overnight. In response, governments and central banks did something unprecedented. They flooded the system with money. Trillions of dollars. Near zero interest rates. Emergency programs layered on top of emergency programs. It worked, at least at first. Markets stabilized, businesses survived, jobs came back. And once the panic faded, something else took its place. Confidence. Money was cheap, borrowing felt painless, risk felt distant. Asset prices did not just recover, they surged. Stocks climbed. Housing prices jumped. Speculative investments exploded. Entire new asset classes appeared overnight. And just like the 1920s, a familiar story took hold. This time is different. The reasoning sounded solid, rates were low, technology was accelerating, artificial intelligence, automation, digital platforms, all of it felt transformative. And to be fair, much of it is. But that's the trap. Bubbles don't form because people are wrong about the future. They form because people are too confident about how quickly the future arrives. In the late 1920s, productivity was real. Companies were genuinely more efficient, but stock prices raced far ahead of profits. Valuations detached from reality. Debt magnified gains. And because prices kept rising, the debt didn't feel dangerous. Debt rarely does, until it does. The same thing happened again. Low interest rates made high valuations feel reasonable at first, but gradually profits became optional. Stories mattered more than balance sheets. Growth projections stretched further and further into the future. Leverage crept in quietly. Margin debt rose. Corporations borrowed aggressively. Governments ran massive deficits. Households took on more risk. And because prices were rising, no one felt exposed. That's when bubbles become invisible. Not because they disappear, but because they feel normal. In the late 1920s, investing wasn't just common. It was encouraged. Newspapers celebrated stock market success. Warnings were brushed off as pessimism from people who didn't understand the new economy. In the 2020s, skepticism was treated the same way. If you questioned valuations or debt levels, you were told you didn't get technology, or that central banks wouldn't allow markets to fall, or that the old rules simply didn't apply anymore. That belief that the downside has been eliminated is always the final ingredient, because bubbles aren't really about prices, they're about belief. Belief that growth will outrun debt, belief that risk has been tamed, belief that someone else will always step in if things go wrong. In the 1920s, people believed prosperity had been solved. Then came 1929. The collapse didn't happen all at once. At first, prices dipped. Then they dipped again. Margin calls forced selling. Credit tightened. Confidence cracked. Once trust broke, leverage flipped from a tailwind into an anchor. Banks failed. Credit vanished. Unemployment surged. What had felt like a golden age unraveled faster than anyone expected. Now here's the crucial difference. The 2020s are not the 1920s. We have deposit insurance. Central banks act faster. Governments understand contagion better. Financial systems are more complex, but also more monitored. Information spreads instantly. That matters. But it doesn't erase cycles. It changes how they play out. Instead of a single violent collapse, modern systems often absorb stress by stretching it out. Losses get socialized. Interventions delay consequences. Pain becomes less dramatic but more persistent, and that introduces a new risk: moral hazard. When people believe markets will always be rescued, they take more risk. Leverage builds higher. Bubbles grow larger. The eventual adjustment doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. This is why the modern version of the bubble may not end like 1929. The danger today isn't necessarily a sudden deflationary crash. It is slow erosion. Inflation that eats away at purchasing power. Debt that becomes harder to service. Growth that never quite meets expectations. Repeated cycles of stimulus and tightening that exhaust trust over time. The bubble doesn't need to pop loudly to cause damage. It can leak, and leaks are harder to notice, because nothing feels broken all at once. Savings. Buy a little less each year. Assets stop rising, but never really fall. Costs creep up faster than wages. The future feels less generous than promised. This is why the comparison to the 1920s matters, not because history repeats exactly, but because behavior does. We still chase returns. We still extrapolate recent success forever. We still believe we've outgrown old limits. Sometimes things really are different, but rarely in the way people expect. Technology changes fast. Human psychology doesn't. So are we guaranteed another 1929? No. History doesn't work that cleanly. But are we replaying the same emotional setup that preceded past crashes? Absolutely. And that's the real warning. The same bubble that crashed the 1920s wasn't about radios or stocks or even money. It was about confidence outrunning reality. When belief outruns cash flow, when debt outruns income, when optimism outruns fundamentals, the cycle always turns. The timing is unpredictable. The pattern is not. And the most dangerous part is this: no one inside a bubble ever believes they're in one, because if they did, it wouldn't be a bubble. It would be caution. And caution is never popular right before reality shows up.